Welcome to Real Estate Resource. Thanks for stopping by. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you'll know when new videos are available. I really hope you enjoy this one. Okay, so good morning, everybody. Really, the purpose of this class, and I haven't done one in a while. I think we did it maybe, I want to say 2 years ago. But really what this is this is just a way for us to look at a systematic way of servicing a listing, right? We're going to talk about it from the beginning. We're not going to talk about the prospecting and things like that. But what we're going to look at is from the time you set an appointment and what you need to do, for that person that you set the appointment with as a seller, the prep for that, and the process of going through servicing that listing. So that's what we're going to look at today in the class. And I think it's important that everybody has whether it's the system that we talk about or you start looking at it the way I'm going to talk about it today, what needs to happen for you all as agents to be most productive, most efficient, and to not let the possibility of production slip between your fingers is being systemized in everything you do, whether that be in your lead follow-up or how you prospect, the way that you put together your presentations for your listing. Those kind of things, like if I do the same things day in, day out, I do the same things with every appointment, those habits, that systematic approach to things is going to help you to be better, less stressed out, right? You're going to have less stress in your business because you know what the next step is. You're not kind of playing it by ear or trying to make it up as you go. And I think that's where a lot of us fall into issues is we're playing it by ear. We're winging it. As stuff comes up, we're then going out and trying to approach that in the moment, right? So this is just, I'm going to set up, this is how I do everything that I do when it comes to a seller. And that's going to make your job a lot easier, make you look more professional. It's going to make your clients feel much more comfortable. And then that leads to referrals. Okay. So I'm going to share my screen unless anybody has any questions. If you do have a question, I'd like to kind of save all the questions till the end, just to kind of make sure that we get through. If something comes in your mind and you don't feel like you can wait until we get through the end of the presentation, go ahead and type that in the chat and I'll try to get to it as soon as I can. Okay. So let me get everything ready here. I was less prepared than I thought I was going to be. And try this one more time. Share my screen. All right. So you should be looking at a blank one right now. And now what you should be looking at is the seller process opening slide. So we're going to go through this. What I do have for those of you that work here in the office is I have a kind of text version of this that we're going through, a little bit like a PDF that you guys can look through. You can reference, go back to, stuff that we've talked about here, work with any of the notes that you take today. So let's jump in. First off, what we want to do is make sure when it comes to our listing appointments, we pre-qualify everyone. There should never be a time when we choose not to pre-qualify a potential listing appointment. So I set the appointment. So I make a phone call. I set the appointment today. And whether it be later today after I set the appointment or a couple days prior to the appointment or the day prior to the appointment, at some point prior to me going out and meeting with the seller, I am going to pre-qualify the seller. or sellers. And ultimately, the best case scenario is if I'm meeting with 2 or 3 sellers, if I'm meeting with multiple sellers, that I ask these pre-qualification questions to all of them. What happens when I pre-qualify is, number one is it eliminates objections. It prepares me for potential objections if those objections aren't eliminated. And sometimes it may eliminate the appointment period. So not only am I pre-qualifying for the motivation and finding out what is important to my sellers so that my presentation is tailored towards the things that are important to them, but it's also me finding out if the motivation that we discussed during our prospecting time, right, when I met them as a contact and then set the initial appointment, if that motivation is legitimate and it is worth the time to sit down with somebody to list their house. Because if somebody has low motivation, then automatically it's high price and it becomes a very difficult process to get their home sold. So what we're doing with this pre-qualification is we're identifying their motivation, making sure that they are a good candidate for getting their home sold, that they have a need to sell their house. And number 2 is we're identifying any potential objections that may come on a listing appointment. What happens is if I choose not to pre-qualify, which is what the majority of agents choose to do, right? We're talking about the wing it. Like, I got an appointment, I'm going tomorrow, I'm going to put together my CMA and I'm going to put together my listing presentation, whatever that may be. And then I'm just going to go in there and start showing them what we could do to sell their house. The problem is that we, with those appointments usually become very difficult because they start throwing out objections that you were underprepared for or unprepared for completely. That's what the pre-qualifying is for. And I don't care if this is a referral from your mom or if it is your mom, you're going to pre-qual this listing appointment regardless. Okay. So you have to do it. And if we're going to do it, then we're going to use the Mike Ferry pre-qualification script. Now, if you feel like you've got a script that's better out there, 100% use it. But I know in the 20 plus years that I've been doing this and then working with agents and trying to coach and train and all those things, there's no better questions to ask than when we pre-qualify with the Mike Ferry script. Now, where the Mike Ferry script falls short is not in its contents, but it's in the use that the agents choose to use it for, and what I mean by that is that they're not asking all the questions. And I can almost guarantee that those of you that have used this, that are watching this video right now or in this class right now, have even skipped question number 1 in the pre-qualifying. Okay. But if we look at these questions and we take them as they go, they make a lot of sense. Like I said, it's going to help us identify motivation and a potential objections that we're going to have when we get to that presentation. And if I know going into a presentation what objection that seller is going to have, I can already have my presentation planned for it. So it's easy questions before I come out. There are a number of questions I have to ask you. Okay. If what I say makes sense, and you feel comfortable and confident that I can sell your home, are you planning to list your home with me when I come out today at 7? Perfect, right? And it doesn't matter if the answer is yes or no. All we're trying to do is get them to communicate with us so we can start to identify where there's a problem. Okay. Are you planning to interview more than one agent for the job of selling your home? I guarantee you that 99% of the agents that use this script don't ask that question. Now, when I say 99%, I mean those of us that are using it, we've been exposed to it, that are not the highly productive agents, because the highly productive agents are asking that question. It's important to know if the seller is interviewing more than one agent. You're not the only one. Tell me again where you're moving to. Again, I'm just trying to clarify what their motivation is. How soon do you have to be there? Again, I'm clarifying the motivation that we've already discussed. When I see you, how much do you want to list your home for? As a professional real estate agent, I study homes and prices every day. Therefore, I assume you'll list with me at a price that will cause your home to sell. These are all very straightforward questions. By asking these questions, it's going to prevent you wasting your time and wasting their time. And you've got to make sure that you make a commitment to your business that this is not an optional piece of every listing that you go on. This has to be foundationally required for you to be successful in your career as a listing agent. Because these are the things. This pre-qualifying script is one of the main basics for people who are highly successful listing agents. Your conversion rate is going to increase exponentially when you make this a habit of pre-qualifying your listing presentation. So just make sure that one of the questions at the pre-qual that you ask that's not on, well, I think it is on here, is are all the decision makers going to be there? I think that's one of the pieces in pre-qualifying that listing agents miss on a regular basis, especially newer ones or inexperienced ones. They don't ask to make sure that everybody who has to make the decision is going to be available for that appointment. And if they are not, if everybody who has to be involved in the decision-making process is not in your appointment, you've got to reschedule that appointment. You cannot keep that appointment with one person, get their sign off, and then have to do the whole presentation over again with a second. If you're doing that again, you're ruining the efficiency of your business. This is the idea of being productive, is being efficient. It's a system. You've got to be disciplined to follow those rules for yourself. If you're undisciplined in that, where you'll choose to do things outside of what's in your best interest, you're not doing you or your sellers any favors. Okay, so number one, pre-qualify. It's the first thing that we're talking about in this because it is the most important step of being prepared for your listing presentation. So I hope I drove the point home enough that this is not a negotiable piece. This has to be 100% of every phone call and conversation you have with a seller prior to your appointment. Next up is prepping. This is another step, is that we don't take time to prep because we're not in a position, right, to kind of know what we need to prep for. So we haven't done the pre-qual. We don't have enough information. We kind of go off, we're so excited that we got the yes that we're ready to run out to a listing presentation without knowing all the information. And I've had so many conversations with agents where I'm going on a listing appointment, and they're asking me questions. What should I take? What should I do? And I start asking them questions about the seller, and their response is, I don't know. That being that underprepared or ill-prepared for a listing appointment is just a recipe for disaster when it comes to getting those listings signed and converting appointments into actual contracts. So preparation is key, but it's also, your preparation is based off that last step, which is the pre-qual, where I know everything that I need to know to be able to inform the seller when I get on that appointment. Okay. So I've done my pre-qual. I know what I need to know from them. Now I'm doing the preparation. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to order a property profile from my title company. Now, we're not going to go into pricing and how you do that and building a CMA and all. We're not going to do that. That's separate classes, but we're just talking about the process. Make sure that you get from your title company a property profile that has the comparables. Right? Have some comparables, because that's going to help for you to start to do your pricing. This is my advice, and that's it. And it's my way of comping out properties, is I always use the title close sales. Everything goes through title. Not everything is listed in the MLS, as we know. Right? Not everybody puts all their listings in the MLS. Even those that are registered and closed, listing agents don't take the time to put those into the MLS for the purposes of comparables. So I always like to go through title. I do use the MLS when we're reviewing the pricing that we've come up with to see where I fall within the competition in the market and how much competition there is in the market. I will use the MLS for that. But the actives don't really affect my pricing, and I use that basically from the close. So property profile is super important. Get that as soon as you can from your title rep. Now, the listing presentation. Now, if you want to go, bare bones, I don't need anything except for I'm going to walk in there with the comparables. I'm going to explain everything. totally understand. You can use the Mike Ferry listing presentation script to go through it just based off of that. But most people are going to need to have some kind of a presentation, especially for a seller. They're going to feel some need to see those comparables presented in a way that makes sense to them. So for agents here, for Century 21 agents, you have, for Allstars, you have our marketing plan of action, which is part of our library, right? That has some information about the office specifically, especially helpful for those agents that don't have a lot of history. So you can use the information about the office and that to leverage your conversations with sellers. If you work for Century 21 as a whole, or I'm sorry, the MLS for everybody, you have the cloud CMA that you can prepare, right? You can prepare a cloud CMA, and that helps you with the comparables. Or for Century 21, we have something as part of the Moxie tools, which we're having those trainings on, called Moxie Present, which is a interactive tool, and it's really basically live at all times. So if I create a presentation today in Moxie Present, and the comparables that I pull into that CMA, if those change between the time I create the CMA and my appointment, they will change in my presentation. So I can actually have a live presentation with my clients. If I'm so inclined to do that, I can manipulate this CMA on the spot if necessary. Okay. Now, if you have the time prior to your appointment, go preview the neighborhood. Drive through the neighborhood, go by the house, take a picture of the house, use an actual photo of the house as part of your CMA. What we want to do is look like when we walk into that appointment that we already have gotten the job, that we've done everything that's necessary to start to get their house, the process of getting their home sold. Okay, so if you guys are going to be professionals, this is the way that we have to make sure that that's getting taken care of, right? Having a clear presentation. So whether it's Cloud CMA or you use the Moxie Present or you have some other tool that you use for CMA, have a very clear direction and a way to follow that presentation so that your information is presented to the client clearly. And if we do that every single time, again, we're walking into that appointment like we've already gotten the job. Okay, next up, let's talk about, because now we've done our CMA, we've got to go into these listing presentations prepared for the discussions surrounding change to compensation, right? Because obviously that's going to be an important conversation that we're going to have with the sellers. So please just remember that we're going to have to talk to them specifically about the idea that our listing agreement is going to be stating the compensation amount that they're paying us, the listing agent, the listing brokerage, for representing them in the sale of their home. Any compensation they may or may not be willing to pay will be negotiated in the RPA if the buyer is going to be represented by an agent. Now, there obviously is an option for a buyer to not be represented because they don't want to pay. But what we want to do is explain to the seller still the benefit of them offering compensation to a buyer's broker. There is a huge impact on a seller that is unwilling to pay any buyer's agent compensation. Even if that compensation were to be me, there is a huge impact on there because it is difficult to find a buyer that is willing to purchase the property unrepresented. And if there are buyers who don't have the ability to cover compensation, you've now eliminated a whole pool of buyer. So you have to make sure that they understand that if they choose not to pay compensation or a very low amount of compensation, you've got to have a plan in the conversation for how that's going to affect them moving forward. And at the moment that we're having this class, as inventory is continuing to rise and demand is not rising at the same rate as the inventory, even though it's not affecting pricing considerably, right? We're seeing minimal price increases still. If you look at our market area if we look month over month, there's still, from May of last year to May of this year, there's still almost a 2% increase in sales price, even with the inventory going up and the demand reducing, based on affordability and things like that. But what does matter is about how much time we spend on market. One of the things that I discuss with you guys all the time, especially when we're looking at our market statistics, is there are 3 questions that we have to answer for a seller when they choose to use us as their listing agent. And that is how much, right? How much you're going to list my property for? How fast, how soon are you going to get my property sold? And at what cost, right? And that at what cost is the amount of compensation I'm going to pay. If you can answer how fast and how and how much in a way that makes them feel comfortable and confident that you're going to do the job, you won't have to worry about the at what cost, right? So, but we have to understand we have to make sure that they're clear that if we look at the idea of that we're not offering any compensation to a buyer's broker, or we're going to offer a small amount, that's not the norm that's happening in the business, it's going to affect that days on market. So what it does affect is the time that it's going to take us, and maybe it ultimately will affect the price because of the amount of time it's going to take to get the property sold. So those are the conversations we have to have, and they have to understand, it has to be crystal clear. They have no obligation to pay compensation to a buyer's broker, but the benefit of it is, and every one of them is going to have a different conversation. Again, going back to the pre-qualification, when we're having those pre-qual questions and scripts and dialogues, when we know that somebody is motivated and has a specific amount of time where they need to be somewhere else, that conversation about the idea of offering some kind of compensation to a buyer's broker is not as difficult, because they know that it's going to affect their time on market and they have a specific amount of time they need to sell. The undermotivated sellers, right? The undermotivated sellers, the ones who want to price high, they don't really know, they don't have a timeline of where they want to be. Those are the ones that you're going to have a harder time with, the people that, for them offering compensation to a buyer's broker. So again, the amount of prospecting we do and making sure that we're pre-qualifying everybody and identifying sellers that are truly motivated is going to make your job easier. And that's where it increases the efficiency. Okay. Now let's move on to servicing and selling the listing. Okay, servicing and selling the listing. The CRMLS, the rules around CRMLS and the clear cooperation policy, those changed a long time ago, and there's still a lot of struggle for real estate agents on what the rules are and what the consequences are. For the CRMLS, the listing has to be added to the MLS within 2 days of its active date. Now, active date, that's either the start date at the top of your listing agreement, or it's the date it was signed, whichever is later. Okay, so for example, if I have a listing appointment today and I have that seller sign the listing agreement today, and my start date is today, right? It starts on June 10th. The listing agreement starts on June 10th and goes for the next 6 months. Then within 2 days of today, which is Thursday, right? Today's day 0, tomorrow's day 1, day 2 is Thursday. By Thursday, that listing either has to be registered, coming soon, or active in the MLS. Those are the 3 statuses. So remember, registered doesn't show up on the MLS. It has a different point of entry for us to put the information in, and that's usually on your dashboard. Okay. On your left-hand side of your dashboard, it says registered listings. That's where those get inputted. Once you have a listing that's registered in there and it's inputted in there, if you ever do make it active, you have to send it from that registered listing list to the actual MLS, where it will become an incomplete listing input in your CRMLS. Okay, registered. Coming soon. I can put it coming soon in the next 2 days. If I put it coming soon, it will be coming soon on the MLS for 21 days. During that 21-day period, I cannot show the property. I can market it all I want. I can door knock. I can cold call. I can put it on my social media. I can put it on my website. I can put a sign up. I can do everything that I could do with an active except for show the property. Let's backstep. Registered, I can't market it at all. No door knocking, no flyers, no social media, no website, no cold calling, no sign. But if I have a disclosure regarding agency relationship signed with a client within the last year, I can still show them the property. I just cannot market it to the public. So there's the difference there with registered. Okay. And active, we all know what active is. Active in the MLS, everybody gets to see it. You can show it, you market it, you do all the stuff that you need to do. If you're going to register your listing, with your listing agreement comes a form called the Multiple Listing Service Addendum, or MLSA. This is the first page of that form. If you're going to register your listing, you are required to fill out this form. And when you do, you're going to go to paragraph D, and this is the seller instructions to broker. Seller instructs broker to market the property to the public at the beginning of the listing period. That's the default. The default is, so if I'm going to go active or coming soon, I don't need to do anything here. But if I'm going to be registered, I have to check the box there that says D2, where it says or 2. Seller instructs broker to exclude the property from dissemination by the MLS. The MLS may require its own form or this MLSA to be submitted. Seller understands that no public marketing will occur, and the scope of the marketing that will occur will consist only of direct one-on-one promotion between the brokers and licensees affiliated with the listing broker and their respective clients while properties excluded. Seller understands the impact of opting out of the MLS. So then I will choose either A, to begin marketing the property to the public through and including through the MLS on a specific date, or not to market the property at all. Okay. So if I'm going to register a listing, this section of your listing agreement has to be filled out. If it is not, it could be a violation, because if I register the listing and then the CRMLS requests a copy of the MLSA and I don't have it, I could be looking at a fine of $2,500. If I have a property and I list it, we talked about those 2 days, and I don't put it as active, coming soon, or registered properly, I could get a fine of $2,500 from the MLS. And it is not a fine that you can dispute. You can't fight it. You got to pay it. And if you don't pay it, you're going to lose your MLS privileges. So hopefully there's enough of you on here that are going to see this and are going to take it, are going to listen to what I'm saying and are going to do this, because when we have registered listings that are still coming through the office, a lot of times we don't have this filled out properly, and we have to go back, tell the agent, get it done, get it taken care of properly. Okay. So that's paragraph 2D of the MLSA. That is what you have to make sure is filled out properly if you're going to register a listing. That is an excluded listing. Now, if you're going to do a coming soon, the CRMLS has its own form called the coming soon status that explains how coming soon works, shows there's no showings, the whole thing. You should be getting that signed by the seller, and you can get this from the CRMLS's website, not the matrix, but the website for the CRMLS themselves. Underneath their compliance section, you can download this PDF. If you don't have that, our listing coordinator has a copy of it that you can get. You should be adding this if you're doing it coming soon. Okay. You should be adding this. Okay, so that's the statuses. I'm going to stop because there's a couple questions. I'm not going to show the whole sheet right now because it's not a training about the sheet. It's just understanding how you guys, what forms you guys need to use to make sure that you're in compliance. If the property was to be public by May 26th, for example, but then the property is not ready until June 6th, what do? You cannot extend coming soon. Coming soon is 21 days and 21 days only. Once you get to day 21, it switches to active. So if that property is not ready to go, it is going to be active, and then you're going to have to put it on hold. If it's registered, it doesn't matter. What I would do is just to be safe, I would do a modification of terms to your listing agreement because that MLSA is part of it, or do a new MLSA as part of the listing that would extend it to June 6th, just so there is no question that the seller is on board with this extension of the registered status. Okay. All right, let's keep going. Let's look at the photos. The photos, this is one of the things that I always get as a reason why agents want things to be registered, so they're excluded. They say, oh, well, I got to get the photos taken and all that. Terrific. Your time period for photos is different than your time period for an active listing. So for an example, if I put a listing in as active or coming soon, I have 5 days from that input date in which to upload all my photographs before I'm in violation. So again, yes, it's fine if you want to make it registered until the photos are done so you can go live with everything at one time. Terrific. Just make sure that your MLSA is filled out properly, that your seller is aware of this is what my plan is. I think the reason that I'm stressing this so much is because we're still in the mode as listing agents where we're taking a marketing plan of action without sharing that plan with the seller. I still believe there are quite a few agents out there that are registering their listings because they have the belief that somehow by it being registered and nobody else seeing it, it's going to give them an upper hand on double ending it. And that's fine if that's your plan. But if you're not sharing that plan with the seller, are we providing the level of service that seller deserves and that we've promised them when we're going through? So it's okay if that's what your plan is. If your marketing plan is, hey, we're going to withhold it for 10 days, 12 days, 2 weeks, whatever, so I can get pictures, we can get it cleaned up, I can stage it, I can, whatever it is I'm going to do. And then I'm going to try to find a buyer. And you share that with your seller, and your seller signs off and signs that paperwork that says that they're okay with it not being marketed for that amount of time, then go for it. Do it. The issue that I'm finding is I see that agents are doing this sometimes and maybe not sharing having the entire conversation with them, what it means to be registered with their sellers. So it's just that there's some lack of transparency there. That's all we want to do, is make sure that we're being as professional and transparent as possible. But as far as pictures go, if I want to get it active so everybody sees it, or I want to get it coming soon so it's already out there and starting to create buzz, I have 5 days to get that picture up. Okay. Do know that obviously the more pictures, the better, but as long as you have one picture of the front of the property, you will avoid a violation for photos. Okay, so just know you have to have that. Now, what I would tell you guys, and this is a little outside of the servicing of the listings, just to kind of cover, like to finish up with registered listings. If you register your listing properly, you get it in escrow before it goes into the MLS and you close it, you still need to put it into the MLS, and it's going to go in as active, pending, and closed all right in a row. And you're going to do that as soon as it closes, within 2 days of it closing. And then that way you get credit on the MLS. That listing is out there for comparables, but you didn't have to be on the MLS for the entire time. And at that point, you only have to have the one photo up of the property so that you can avoid any violations. So just a little caveat to the registered listings. Now, when it comes to photos, I really hope all of you are hiring a professional photographer, but you have to be careful of licensing issues. Okay. So when I hire a professional photographer, when you guys hire professional photographers, I'm assuming you're signing some kind of a contract with them, usually their paperwork, whatever it is. And I'm guessing, just based on my history with how you guys read contracts, you're not reading any of these licensing agreements that you may or may not have with these photographers. And the problem with that is that if we don't know what's in that licensing agreement and we use the photographs that we pay for these listings and we use them outside of what that licensing agreement allows for you to do, that photographer could come after you for a copyright infringement because that photographer still kind of owns those photographs. Okay. So to make sure that we're in a place where we can use the photographs however we need to use them, CAR has created a form called the PAI. And that PIA, the PIA form. And what that is it's a property images agreement. And if you have your photographer sign this, then what it's doing is this photographer is now giving you the opportunity to make sure that you're compliant with the property being the MLS, you using it for your marketing materials, you using it for social media, you using it for your website, it being licensed to other websites, right? Because we all know that all of our listings get syndicated to Zillow and Realtor.com and everywhere else. If my licensing agreement isn't proper, I could actually get in trouble for allowing it to be licensed to other websites. So this property images agreement will negate any questions about the licensing of the photographs. So please, if you're using a professional photographer, I suggest that you try to have this form signed with them so that you avoid any problems down the road as far as copyrights would go with those photographs. Next, you can use the listing coordinator. The listing coordinator will input your listings as active, coming soon, or registered. They'll do all of that for you. If it's active and coming soon, there is a form you have to fill out to give her the information necessary for her to input the listing for you. Registered, she could do that. Just make sure that you have that MLSA filled out properly, and she could do that stuff for you. We have the ability to broker load listings and do that. That is a service that we have that you can take the time to do, but you can't just throw it at her and say, okay, do it, and not give her the information that's necessary. Okay. Or you can input all these things yourself. If you want to do it, you have a very particular way. But if you're going to have her do it, she needs all the information, which means all the descriptions, all the legal information about the property. She needs all that in order to be able to do it. There is a form that you can fill out and give to her that she can use to input those listings as active or coming soon. The listing coordinator can upload your photos for you. If you send her all the photos, she can put them into the MLS for you. The listing coordinator will order your sign up. I should have been more specific about that. In this office, she's the only person that can order a sign up for you. You guys cannot go on your own and order signs up. And the reason why we've made that arrangement with the sign company is because we want to avoid that $2,500 fine for you, because I know that some of you are going to be tempted to put a sign up, even if the property is not in the MLS or if it's registered or any of those other things. And if we're marketing a property that is not in the MLS, then you could be facing that $2,500 fine. So in order for us to avoid that for you, you have to order your for sale signs up with us through our listing coordinator. Okay, and she'll do that. Again, another form, the listing coordinator will, you could send her an email, but there's also a sign up order form that you can fill out and put in her mailbox. Okay, so take advantage of that. Again, when we're going through the idea of efficiency and services, know how the services work. It does sometimes become surprising when I have a conversation with an agent. I say, "Oh, you could go talk to the listing coordinator," and they're like, "Who?" And so that's, us being a little better on making sure that everybody's aware of what the services are and how those services work. But I'm letting you know right now, just know that the listing coordinator is going to order your sign. They're not going to order a sign if there's no listing agreement. If you don't provide her with the listing agreement, she's not going to order a sign up. And they will input the listings into the MLS for you. What I would suggest, if you are inputting your own listings into the MLS and updating your listings and things like that, please make sure that the listing coordinator is notified on what the MLS ID is of the listing that you're putting in, because that will, if we don't have that synced up with what's happening in our business or in our back office, then it may restrict some of that syndication stuff. But that's solely for everybody in here. Our listing coordinator will give you 200 flyers every time you take a listing for free. You just have to order them from her. She will get them up and she will get them printed for you. 200 free flyers every time you take a listing. If you want to create your own marketing flyers for your listing, easy. You could do that on Moxie Impress or on our intranet system, allstarsconnect.com. You can go in there and make the listings. So you could create your own listing flyers. This is just an example of there's 21 online where you would go, and then you would go here to Moxie Impress and you would choose what your project is. As you can see, there's templates for social media ads, there's a billboard, there's brochures, e-cards, flyers, postcards, a presentation, social media, videos, virtual tours, property websites. So you can do all of that on Moxie Impress. And then for a simple flyer, you can go into Allstars Connect and you can choose which flyer you'd like to create, and you'll be able to submit that. Okay. If you print them yourself, Gabby, like that's, for us here, if you print them yourself, it's going to count against your total. So I would suggest you give them to the listing coordinator, to Alejandra, to do those for you. Next, I've got the listing. I've started my marketing. I've got it in the MLS. I've got to schedule my first open house. If I'm going to do open houses, hey, look, if some of you have your business plan is I don't do open houses, that's okay. I think the majority of us that are on here and that are going to watch this video, you're going to do an open house. Schedule your first open house. But when you're going to do that, make sure, again, you let our listing coordinator know, because we're going to syndicate it. We're going to put it into our back office so that it goes on Realtor.com. It goes on Zillow. It goes on Trulia. It goes on Century21.com. It goes into the MLS so that people know about your open house. And if you're going to do it, please, at a very minimum, do it 48 hours prior to your open house. Because if I have an open house tomorrow and I'm just gonna, or today, and I'm just barely gonna input it into these systems like Realtor.com, Zillow, Trulia, or the MLS or Century 21, if I'm gonna do that, it's gonna get less exposure because it's not gonna be around long enough for my open house. Try to do it at least 48 hours before, guys, so that you can get the exposure that you need. The idea of doing an open house is to attract bodies, and if all I'm doing at an open house is putting up signs, if that's the only way that I'm getting bodies there, I'm not doing my seller or myself the service of spending the time for 3 or 4 hours at an open house without advertising it. So please make sure that you're submitting these to the MLS, to us for Century 21, and then it's going to show up on all of these places. And that's how you're going to get the exposure that's necessary to have successful open houses, if you're going to spend your time doing that. Okay. Now that we're on the market, we've had our first open house and we're now going through the marketing process. I've got to provide weekly seller updates throughout the entire listing period, right? So we've got to look at the things that I have to have communication with my sellers. And a lot of times what happens is listing agents choose not to have any communication with them when they have nothing to communicate. And there should always be something to communicate with them. So you'll have an opportunity where a listing agent won't call his seller for a while because he hasn't had any, hasn't had activity, hasn't gotten any offers, things aren't happening. So sometimes listing agents fall into the thing where I'm not going to talk to them until I have good news to share with them. But that's not the way that we create the service that is necessary for this listing. And if we ever need to get to the point where we have to talk to them about a price reduction or a price improvement, if I haven't been in communication with them well enough throughout the process, it's going to be a very difficult conversation to talk to them about that price improvement. Okay. So we want to look at what's happening in the stats. Once a week, I would give them local market statistics. What's the average sales price? What's the average days on market? What's happening? How many new homes have come on the market? How many homes have sold? Right? Let them know what's happening in the market so they know where they stand. Now, that's number one. If I'm thinking about at some point, I may have to have a conversation with this seller about a price improvement, knowing where they fit in the rest of the market, the properties that are coming into the market and have left because they've sold, or canceled or expired, where do they fit? Are they in the group that is selling and closing escrow? Are they in the group that's potentially going to expire? Where are they? Where do they fall? And what is that doing to them? Right? Give them feedback of the showings. If you guys as listing agents are not getting feedback from the buyers who saw your property, again, you're doing a disservice to yourself and to your clients. You should know what the potential client thinks about that home. Your market is the buyers. And if you don't ask what the buyers think of it, especially those buyers that don't submit offers, because we've all had properties where we get showings and no offers. But if we're not taking the next step of going to the listing agent and saying, or to the buyer's agent and saying, hey, you guys showed my property on Saturday. Let me know what you think. What did you think of it? Where are you at? What did your buyers think? If you're not doing that, then you're missing a potential gold mine of information to share with the seller, especially if you need to improve price. Okay? So this stuff is not optional. Every week, this should be what's happening in my communication with my seller during the entire listing period. Should not stop. Get your disclosures done at the very beginning, right? Through this process. Prior to me having an offer accepted, I should have all the disclosures done. I should order my prelim. I should order the termite. I should order the pre-sale inspection. Now, pre-sale inspection, I should have been ordered like day one. I probably should have put this a lot earlier, but get all of these things ordered. Have them all in place prior to having an offer accepted. This is going to help you, again, be more efficient when we get into that transaction period that we're going to move into next. Have these things done, and your avid needs to be done. My biggest pet peeve is the lack of importance that listing agents and buyer's agents, all agents, put on their agent's visual inspection disclosure. Guys, that needs to be done within the first 7 days of an escrow at the very least. But if you're the listing agent, it should be done immediately when you do your TDS. It should be completed. If you're a buyer's agent, get that done in the first 7 days of a transaction. So now we're going to accept an offer and we're going to open escrow, right? That's ultimately what we all want from all the service and the marketing that we did. When you do that, you're going to turn in your file to the transaction coordinator that you use. If you don't use a transaction coordinator, make sure that the open escrow sheet gets delivered to our listing coordinator, because she still tracks our sales. She doesn't just track the listings. There is an open escrow sheet. You guys should be filling it out, those of you that work here in Central 21 Allstars, and giving this to your transaction coordinator. I understand that a lot of you have the transaction coordinator fill that out. You guys should be filling that out so they have the information on who to communicate with and how to communicate with them. Okay? Now let's look at the time periods, right? So we've got our offer accepted. I've given everything to my transaction coordinator. I'm involved, but let's look at the time periods. First up is the deposit. Okay. So the deposit's required within 3 business days of acceptance. That's just how it works. That's the default. You can change that in encounters, all those things, but we're not talking about that right now. We're just looking at what a defaulted timeline is for an accepted offer. 3 business days after acceptance, that money's got to be wired in. If the buyer fails to make the deposit within that period, you have to send a notice to buyer to perform. There is an aversion for agents to use notices to perform, because the belief is that if I send a notice to perform, then I have to cancel the transaction. That is not true. There is nothing that says you're required to cancel. Is that a consequence of an NBP or an NSP? Absolutely. But is it required? No. But what it does show is that you're doing your job, whether that be as a buyer's agent sending one to the seller or a seller sending one to the buyer's agent. You are doing your job by keeping everybody on time, and nobody could ever question that you didn't do what you were supposed to do when it came to keeping the buyer within the transaction time periods. So you will send an NBP if they don't make that deposit in time. Within 7 days of acceptance, you have to make sure that you deliver all the disclosures and reports from the seller to the buyer. And the reason for that is if you don't have everything ready and you miss that timeline, you could be that delay could extend the buyer's contingency period. And that's not what we want. We're talking about efficiency and great service. This is servicing. I'm on time. Now, the TC is going to help you with this stuff, but you guys also, it's a two-way street. You can't just rely on the transaction coordinator is going to do this all on their own. You guys have to be in good communication with your transaction coordinator and make sure that everything is getting taken care of, because if something gets missed, and I know that transaction coordinators, whether they be the ones that work here or the ones that you guys hire that work outside of here, they are human beings and things will get missed. But if you guys are working together, less things will get missed. Make sure the escrow instructions are signed and returned in a timely manner. That's a huge thing that delays the escrow all the time. The contract says they have to be returned within 5 days after receipt. If I don't get them returned as buyer, what I'm doing is I'm giving the seller an opportunity to cancel on me. And if I'm not on top of the buyers, I'm not doing my job as the listing agent to make sure things are happening in a timely manner. I'm going to tell you that the SI should be for sure one of the very first things that gets returned for both the seller and the buyer. When it comes to these, make sure that that is part of that escrow packet that is returned, because it is going to relieve some issues, because title will then be able to make sure that they have everything clear, that there are no issues that are affecting title that are going to be a hiccup or a roadblock in this transaction. 17 days after acceptance, the buyer is supposed to remove their inspection, investigation, appraisal, and loan contingencies. Stay on these time periods, guys. Be on it. I know that your transaction coordinator is going to back you up, but you're the one who's responsible. The seller hired you. Okay. So you need to be on it. And if the buyer is delinquent, you have to send a notice to buyer to perform. Again, stop being afraid of the NBPs. We have to use those. They are a tool for us. We have to make sure that we're using that tool so that we're showing our sellers how professional we are, that we're trying to make sure that everybody is staying on timelines. Okay. Make sure, now that we're past the 17 days, we're getting later into the escrow, if the seller has agreed to do any repairs, make sure they're working on them already. I know that those repairs don't have to be done until the buyer does their final walkthrough, but at least make sure that they're being worked on. There's nothing worse than things getting pushed to the last minute and you get delays in escrow. We have to be communicating with our sellers all the way through this process. And I think a lot of times what happens for listing agents is once we get to the point where contingencies are removed, we kind of take our foot off the gas and we just wait for it to close. But we've got to still be in communication with our sellers, especially sellers that are getting, that are going to stay in possession after the close, that are, have a contingency. We have to be in communication with them so that we don't have those weird delays or problems at the close of escrow. So make sure they're working on the repairs, or there's a schedule for them to work on the repairs so that they can be completed in time for the final walkthrough. Okay. 5 days prior to close of escrow, please have a conversation with your sellers about making the property available for the final walkthrough. Again, I think this becomes a listing agent's problem, is an issue that we don't communicate with our sellers enough, that they have to give access to the buyers for this final walkthrough prior to close, and that we should be scheduling it some days, 5 days prior to the close. We don't have that clear conversation with the sellers when this whole process comes in, and then we get sellers that push back, that they don't want to let the buyers come in for that final walkthrough. And then all we're doing is we're causing another problem and another delay and issues that may arise because we're not following the terms of the agreement. So please make sure your sellers are clear, prepared, like that they're prepared and ready to make the property available for the buyers to come in and do their final walkthrough and verify that those repairs are completed. At that final walkthrough, have all of the paperwork ready. So if I did a bunch of repairs, I hired somebody to do them, which is what you should be doing, have the receipts from the contractor, have the work orders, have the permits if they were necessary, have them there in an envelope and a folder at the final walkthrough and go, here you go. Here's everything. That's the right way to do it. And I know that the majority of us don't do it that way. And it's just, again, making it systematic is going to keep us from having those things missing, those pieces missing in really doing an excellent job. And once you become excellent at this, it's a lot easier to get referrals. After that walkthrough is done or before the walkthrough is done, can you guys go through and make sure that your sellers moved everything out, including any debris? it's amazing to me how many times I have conversations where like, well, I don't know, the seller told me they're going to go, but I haven't been over there. Make sure that the property is clear of debris, that they've moved all their personal items out. Because if the seller moves out and leaves that stuff behind, it's really going to become your headache. And again, if I'm doing my job right and I'm providing the great service I should be, this shouldn't be an issue. This shouldn't be an issue. And if I'm in communication the whole time with my seller, this is not going to be an issue. I promise you that the majority of the times when the sellers are the ones that are being jerks about, well, I'm not picking up the trash, I'm not doing anything, is because we as listing agents didn't do 100% of the job we promised them to do. So not only are they pissed at the buyer because something happened, but they're pissed off at us because they didn't get the service that they thought they deserved. So please, the communication is going to help with this, but make sure that you're involved with this end of the escrow process. Once they've moved out, go collect the keys in the lockbox. That's it. It's done, right? We're getting ready to close escrow. If we're ready to close escrow, they've done their final walkthrough, the sellers are out, everything's done. Go get the lockbox off and get the keys so that when it does record and we're ready, we have the keys ready to go. There is nothing that is more annoying to me than when I hear a buyer's agent or listing agent tell a buyer, oh, the lockbox is on there, just go get the keys out of it and then I'll pick up my lockbox later. No, come on, that's not service. Go get your lockbox, get the keys, meet with the buyer's agent and the buyers to get them the keys, or set up something that makes sense to get the keys. But don't do that. Don't be that person. Get with the listing coordinator to order the sign down. They're going to do that for you. That's what their job is, but just make sure that it's done in a timely manner to get the sign ordered down. Closing it in the MLS. I know that there's a lot of you that like to close it on your own in the MLS. But the listing coordinator will do that for you. It's part of our process in closings. So those of you that work here for us, listing coordinator will generally make sure that it has been closed out, or will close it or request that close. But you guys are welcome to close it down the MLS if you want to make that part of your service. At that point, it's congratulations, you closed an escrow. So you've been through all of this process. You got to this point. You did everything the way you were supposed to, and you closed escrow and you got paid. And we're proud of you for doing that. Now, here's a little seller transaction checklist that is part of the document that I had promised you guys. That is, kind of a little ebook or whatever you want to call it. That is this whole process that we just talked about, plus a little checklist for you to monitor, just to make sure that you guys are following all of the steps. So now, here we go. What part of this process do you guys really need to tighten up? Like, that's what I want you to look at. What part of the process do you need to tighten up? What do you need to do better? What aren't you doing? What should you add? What are you doing and maybe not doing it you could be doing it a better way? And then how are you going to be better at communicating with your sellers? That's the homework for you guys moving forward. Okay. Think about those things. What are the process do you need to fix, and how can you be better at communicating with your sellers? That's the end of the presentation, but now is your chance for questions. No questions, you guys? Like, damn, my camera's acting up. No questions, huh? Yeah. So, we are having classes here on Moxie Works, and those got delayed because there was an emergency with the trainer. But yes, the Moxie Present, Moxie Impress, those two things those tools I talked about, they will be trainings going forward as part of our training. All right. Well, I appreciate you guys for being here. I'm hoping that you guys can take this on, look at this, look at the pieces that can help fit in your business, things that you may be able to do better and provide better service for your clients. Because obviously, like I said earlier, the better service that we provide, the more chances that we get referrals. For those of you that work for Century 21 Allstars, If you would like a copy of the printed version of this, my little kind of handout that follows along that presentation and the checklist, send me an email. I'm not going to respond to a text message. You got to send me an email. That's the way you're going to get it. Unfortunately, if you don't work here, if you want to become a member of my channel, then you can have an access maybe to the documents. But for that, if you guys missed any part of this, it will be on YouTube later this afternoon. So you can go back, review it, look at it over and over if you need to. If you missed it, if somebody that you know should be watching this, please share that YouTube channel with them, and subscribe and like all the videos. That helps me out on YouTube. So I appreciate you all. Thank you so much for being here. Take care, and hopefully this makes you guys all better listing agents. I look forward to seeing the results. Have a good one.